I was thinking about this and doing some research on when has any country been asked to give land up that it won in a war. And you can say that it was, their fault and everything else, but you want to make sure that you're very careful on punishment for those transgressions. Remember, the aggressor, really bad aggressor in World War I was Germany, and the world decided to punish Germany. And Germans didn't like it, and that led right directly to World War II. I think without the Versailles Treaty being done the way it was done, we wouldn't have had World War II. We may not have ever seen Hitler rise to power. It would be a good thing. But you also have to set a standard in saying, hey, bad guys, you don't win when you do these things. So this is a really tough balance. But there's only one country in particular in the history of the world that has faced this burden where the whole world is turning on them saying, you got to give this back. Back in 1967, it was Israel. They were surrounded, encircled, and threatened with destruction by every single neighbor. Every country in the region decided together they were going to attack on multiple fronts. Now, their intention was to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. But Israel not only survived, it turned the tide. In 6 days, it gained territory so dramatically that the map of the Middle East had to be withdrawn dramatically. They occupied huge swaths of territory in Jordan and in Egypt, all over the Middle East. All of a sudden, they had all this territory. And then something extraordinary happened. They said, and you don't see this, and Russia, listen carefully to this, you don't see this very often. They said, we don't want all this territory. We want to be left alone, and we really just want a few buffer zones. We don't need all of this land in Jordan. We don't need all of this land in Egypt. We just want to make sure that this can't happen to us again. Well, that's what Russia is saying. Now, whether that's true with Vladimir Putin or not, that's up for you to decide. But what they're saying is they want just a buffer zone away from NATO. And what Ukraine is saying is we want to be part of NATO because we don't trust Russia, nor should they. So we want to we want NATO partnership. Basically, what they want is if Russia attacks us, then all of NATO, Europe and America, need to go in and fight that war with them. That's what they really want. Well, Donald Trump, his allies came out this weekend and said they are very close to an Article 5 kind of agreement. Article 5 comes from the NATO charter, which means it was for Europe against Russia. Anybody who attacks a NATO country, it's an attack on all of us, and we all band together. Now, does that happen? Well, kind of it did after 9/11. Not everybody was involved, but it wasn't, it wasn't like it was intended to be, but that's fine. That's what Ukraine wants. What Russia says they want, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but what they say they want is a buffer zone. If Russia can give up and look instead at the Israeli example of voluntarily, they gave most of it back. The Sinai, Gaza, and parts of the West Bank, they wanted to keep as part of a buffer zone, but they were in there because it was a buffer zone to them, okay? But land 4 times its own size, paid for in blood on an attack that they didn't do, others did to them. They gave all of that back in pursuit of peace. And they said, look, we're not here for more land. We just want our land and to be left alone and have the right to exist. Now, you've done this to us several times, so we want just exactly what Russia could say. We've been attacked by the West over and over again, and they come through this door of either Poland or now they're worried about Ukraine. So we want a buffer zone. Well, the world didn't give them that buffer zone. It's the disputed territories, the occupied territories. but that's why Israel wanted it. And then they gave everything else back. A nation smaller than New Jersey carved out just this little buffer zone so they had a way to protect themselves in case this would ever happen again. Now, compare this with Russia and Ukraine. Crimea was taken in 2014. They invaded Ukraine outright in 2022, and they hold huge swaths of land under the occupation. So what's the path forward? Well, either continued bloodshed, and I think it's important that we put this into perspective. 20,000 Russians, according to the U.S., 20,000 Russians died last month. How long did the Vietnam War go on? That was a total of about 55,000 Americans. In 1 month, you're almost half of the entire Vietnam War. There's a lot of bloodshed, and a lot of bloodshed that is happening on the other side as well. How many have the Russians killed month after month after month? So to stop this, is there something we can look to from 1967? A recognition of the reality on the ground, and then some hard choices on both sides, but anchor it all in peace. Marco Rubio said this weekend, and he's right, peace demands sacrifice. And Israel proved that by returning Sinai to Egypt in exchange for recognition and an end to the hostilities. It wasn't perfect. It didn't solve every grievance, but it worked. And Egypt and Israel haven't gone to war in half a century. Again, it's messy, it's ugly, but we haven't had a war between Egypt and Israel in half a century. Survival outweighs pride. And here's the challenge for Russia and Ukraine. Both claim history in that, deep, deep history in that area. Both claim injustice. And Ukraine, I think you have a much more solid claim on injustice against the Russians than they do the other way. But the question is not whose parchment, who owns this land, who has the oldest deed here. The question is, are you willing to trade land for more lives? Are you willing to give back or give up enough to stop the killing? And that's not just on the Ukraine side. That is also on the Russian side. No other country has done what Israel does. Nobody. No, there's no example like this. No other modern country has been attacked by multiple neighbors, survived, expanded, and then voluntarily gave all that land back, and then is still being judged for not giving all of it back. And the closest comparison is probably from 1971. India took some land from Pakistan in a war, and then they gave it back. After World War II, we didn't occupy. We gave the land back. But neither one of those examples have the double standards that Israel has to live through. But if Russia and Ukraine are serious about ending the war, they might want to look to Sinai. They might want to look back, because that's the model. Not endless battles, not shifting borders by force, but the humility to give back what you can and the wisdom to keep only that in what you have to have for your own security. And then Russia has to do that. And Ukraine has to be willing to swallow that they have lost some of these things, but it's in trade for their security. And if Donald Trump can get Russia to accept an Article 5-like security agreement, that in and of itself is miraculous. And we could actually all go home and say, well, avoided nuclear war on that. Because remember where we were. Remember, in 2022, Joe Biden was saying this is nuclear war. If these things happen, this will be nuclear war. Remember how freaked out we all were? We were like, wait a minute. Nobody's been talking about nuclear war, in 50 years. What do you mean nuclear war? We could avoid that. I don't know who you voted for, nor do I care. I I would hope that we are all praying for cooler heads to prevail. Because this one now comes down to how many more innocent lives that are not involved in this, who are being drafted on both sides, being forced to fight this war on both sides. How many more people are we going to kill or allow being killed because of what? Because of pride? I don't want to see Putin rewarded for anything that he did. Nothing. But war is war. You don't, and if you're willing to continue to fight, but Ukraine's not going to be able to win this war against against Russia. Would you agree with that, Jason? Jason Buttrill is with us. Would you agree? They're not able to fight unless we all get involved and it's world war.
That's the thing. Depending on how many people get pushed into this, there's some crazy developments in this war. Technological advances, drone warfare has escalated out the roof on this. I mean, have you seen some of the videos coming from? And the crazy thing is, Ukraine is actually leading, I think, in just ingenuity as far as like drone warfare. But you can watch videos on X right now that show some of these first person drones chasing down Russian soldiers across the battlefield, and it's going back and forth. To answer your question though more specifically, no, it's basically a war of attrition and numbers. The Russians have more. And the only way that Ukraine can effectively over time win is if we get involved, other NATO countries get involved. That's where things spin out of control.
And here's another thing while we're talking about new technology. Let me go back to the B-2 bomber flying over Donald Trump and Putin. And everybody in the media was like, he's on the red carpet and he saluted him with, a flyover. No, that was intimidation. That was clearly intimidation. What was the message? Why did he say fly the B-2 bomber? Back in 1940, Jack Northrop dreams up the flying wing, and it's radical. It has no tail. It was the YB-49, and it was really futuristic. Now, the Germans were working on the flying wing as well, but nobody could get it to stabilize. The testing, they killed it by 1950 because they just couldn't get it stabilized. Now, fast forward to the 1980s. Under Ronald Reagan, doing the same thing. Remember, this bomber came out in the 1980s. What else was happening in the 1980s? It was Ronald Reagan meeting with the leader of Russia and Gorbachev. And Ronald Reagan was playing the heavy. It's an evil empire, and we're going to end it. And everybody's like, he's going to get us in a nuclear war. And he's like, would you calm down? I have a strategy here. Back in the 1980s, when that was going on, all of a sudden, Northrop Grumman, the aerospace company, they came up with the B-2. Now, it was first flown for people to see in 1989. But we had it before then. Okay? Those things were always out before. It's a UFO. There's just like this flying wing flying. Well, why was this such a big deal? No one has been able to make a flying wing except us. Okay? It's precision. It can drop those bombs in Iran. And it can hit a bomb 50,000 feet. It can drop a bomb, and it will drop a bomb and hit the top of a Pepsi can. That's remarkable precision, okay? And it's unseen with radar. It's untouchable. But here's the thing. It was a message to Putin. We dreamed it up in the 40s. We perfected it in the 80s. And still, in 2025, nothing comes close. This is who we are. Putin's radars didn't even blink, but I can tell you he felt the shadow of that wing. This is why that flyover was such a big deal. It was absolute proof America is in the leadership role again. We don't just lead, we dominate from the vision to the victory. Sleep tight, world. The B-2 is watching, and America is leading again.